Joshua Schmidt here with the Nerd Assassin podcast, coming in for another Spiritual Sunday. Today we're going to look at Ecclesiastes 7. If you remember last week in Ecclesiastes 6, we talked a lot about showing off and decision making. So starting here, verse 1, a good name is better than fine perfume. I'm actually going to stop halfway through this verse because I just think that this is something we should stop on for a little bit. A good name is better than fine perfume is really just reminding us how much your name is worth. It's something you should protect. Continuing on with 1b. And the day of death better than the day of birth. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting. For death is the destiny of every man. The living should take this to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter because a sad face is good for the heart. This kind of stuck out to me because it's something that we don't have in our culture. We don't have this happiness usually that comes with a funeral. I do feel like if I go to a Christian funeral, there tends to be more happiness in it. But really, the writer here is telling us we should be joyful during these times of mourning. And we'll get into a little bit more why here in verse 3. Sorrow is better than laughter because a sad face is good for the heart. The heart of the wise is in the house of the mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of pleasure. So here he goes into really accepting sorrow instead of suppressing it. We need to accept that sorrow is going to be a part of our life and take it in with laughter instead of just ignoring and suppressing it and going out, drinking, hanging out with fools. Verse 5, it is better to heed a wise man's rebuke than to listen to the song of fools. Like the crackling of thorns under the pot, so is the laughter of fools. This too is meaningless. So to me, this reminds me of going out and partying is what I think of when he talks about listening to the song of fools and how the laughter of fools is meaningless, or procrastinating by going out and hanging out with friends instead of doing what you know needs to be done, and really like listening to what a wise man would tell you to do. Continuing on with verse 7. Extortion turns a wise man into a fool, and a bribe corrupts the heart. The end of a matter is better than its beginning, and patience is better than pride. Do not be quickly provoked in your spirit, for anger resides in the lap of fools. So there's two things that I pulled out of this. One, try to end fights instead of keeping them going and trying to win them. The end of a matter is better than its beginning, it says. And the other part that I get out of it is not to be quick to engage in fights. Patience is better than pride. Do not be quickly provoked in your spirit. So really just like don't have that quick temper. Don't start a fight over something small and be quick to engage in one. Continuing on with verse 10. Do not say, why were the old days better than these? For it is not wise to ask such questions. So just one verse here. What do you gain by that? What do you get from saying it was better 5 years ago than it is now? The world's getting worse. Why it's not wise to ask such questions. Verse 11. Wisdom is like an inheritance. Wisdom, like an inheritance, is a good thing and benefits those who see the sun. Wisdom is a shelter, as money is a shelter, but the advantage of knowledge is this, that wisdom preserves the life of its possessor. Consider what God has done. Who can straighten what he has made crooked? When times are good, be happy, but when times are bad, consider God has made the one as well as the other. Therefore, a man cannot discover anything about his future. So we have good days, we have bad days. Everyone has them. And what the writer's asking us to consider here is God made both days for us. God's provided both days for us, which one, we're happy that he gives us those happy days, but I'm going to concentrate more on the sorrowful days because that's kind of what we've been talking about in this chapter is sorrow and mourning, and really these are provided by God too. So one, that reminds me of he's in control, so he's not going to give me anything that I can't take on. And two, he might be giving this for a reason. He might be teaching you something. There might be something to learn from it. So there's good days, there's bad days. Take the good with the bad. Know that God's in control and that he's providing both for you for a reason. Verse 15. In this meaningless life of mine, I have seen both of these. A righteous man perishing in his righteousness, and a wicked man living long in his wickedness. Do not be over righteous, neither be over wise. Why destroy yourself? Do not be over wicked, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time? It is good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. The man who fears God will avoid all extremes. I think this is a really great reminder not to go too far to one side or the other. If you find yourself on an extreme, even some of these that sound positive, being righteous or wise, you're going to end up going too far with it if you're on those extreme. You need to remember both sides of it. Grasp one as well as the other so that you're well balanced. You get stuck on one side or the other, that's when you end up finding yourselves in trouble. Usually there's a lot more safety in the middle. There's very few things that are all one way or all the other way. Verse 19, wisdom makes one wise man more powerful than 10 rulers in a city. There is not a righteous man on earth who does what is right and never sins. So this reminds me of one of the reasons why you don't want to be over righteous. You're going to end up, biting yourself in the butt because you're not going to be perfect all the time. No one is. So no one does what's right and never sins. And it also reminds me of, you might see somebody who's super wise or seems super righteous. But that doesn't mean that you can just follow them and do everything they do, because one, it might be right for them, but two, they also aren't right all the time. Verse 21, do not pay attention to every word people say, or you can hear your servant cursing you, for you know in your heart that many times you yourself have cursed others. These verses reminded me of a saying, don't ask any questions you don't want to know the answer to. If you're going and looking for trouble, you're probably going to find it. If you're super, super closely observing somebody to find what they do wrong, even a righteous man does what is right. Who does what is right is still going to sin. There's not one out there that's not going to. So if you're looking for them to trip up, you're going to find it. So don't ask questions you don't want to know the answer to. Verse 23, all this I tested by wisdom, and I said, I am determined to be wise, but this was beyond me. Whatever wisdom may be, it is far off and most profound. Who can discover it? So I turned my mind to understand, to investigate, and to search out wisdom and the scheme of things, and to understand the stupidity of the wickedness and the madness of folly. I find more bitter than death the woman who is a snare, whose heart is a trap, and whose hands are chains. The man who pleases God will escape her, but the sinner she will ensnare. This is a reminder to me just to avoid bodily pleasures that will ensnare you. Whether that's a girlfriend, somebody you see one time, whether it's something you see on the internet, to really just avoid those, because they're traps and they will trap you if you end up walking around them. And remember this verse about the woman when we were reading the next couple verses. So it really provided me some insight. So verse 27, look, says the teacher, this is what I've discovered. Adding one thing to another to discover the scheme of things. While I was still searching but not finding, I found one upright man among 1,000, but not one upright woman among them all. When I first read this, I was like, what? This doesn't make any sense. There's obviously women who are upright, who walk straight, who walk in God's path. And reading other books of Solomon, he's got whole chapters dedicated to finding a woman, where he says, your wife, if you find one who's righteous, is worth far more than rubies or gold. It's the most precious thing you can find in this life. So I knew he didn't mean that all women are bad and stay away from all of them. But then I rewound a little bit to that verse 26 I said to keep in our minds. I find more bitter than death the woman who is a snare, whose heart is a trap, and whose hands were chains. The man who pleases God will escape her, but the sinner she will ensnare. So I might be wrong on this, but the way I'm reading is I'm connecting verse 26 and 28 and saying, I'm thinking during Solomon's time, you would find way more women being prostitutes or trying to entice guys into their bed. So I think that's what he's saying here, is that you need to be really careful around these sort of women whose heart is a trap and who's trying to snare you. I might be wrong on that. If you guys have other interpretations of this, please reach out to me, because I struggled with that verse. And then verse 29, This only have I found: God made mankind upright, but men have gone in search of many schemes. So this reminds me that people stray from God usually when they're looking for quick wins, for quick pleasures, whether it's a night with the laughter of fools, whether it's a get rich quick scheme, whether it's one night with this girl that I've had a crush for forever, or whether it's buying stuff for people to impress them. Usually when people are looking for these quick pleasures, these many schemes they talks about, that's when they end up getting off that upright path. That's the end of our chapter today. Next week we'll look at chapter 8, which goes into a lot about obedience and leadership. So look forward to that. If you want to continue this conversation with me, feel free to reach out to me on either LinkedIn or Twitter at the Nerd Assassin. Until next time, thanks guys.